faster than checks. And a number of you and obviously the American people have asked a lot of good questions about how this process works, so we thought we'd try to answer some of them. For households who have already filed their income tax return for 2020, the IRS will use that information to determine eligibility and size of payments. For households that haven't yet filed for 2020, the IRS will review records from 2019 to determine eligibility and the size of payment. That includes those who use the non-filer portal for previous rounds of payments, which is a question I think somebody asked sort of about yesterday. For tax returns with direct deposit or bank account information, the IRS will be able to send money electronically. And for those households for which Treasury cannot determine a bank account, paper checks or debit cards will be sent. Of course, we're not taking anything for granted. We're pushing through the finish line here, but you all have asked some really good questions about the implementation that we wanted to get ahead of. So here's what this all means for a typical family of four. With parents making under $150,000 a year combined and with kids in school age 8 and 5, because of the President's Rescue Plan, that family of four will soon be getting $5,600 in direct payments. And because of the expanded child tax credit, they'll get $2,600 in addition to that. So that's $8,200 more in the pockets of this family as they try to weather this storm, on top of additional money in this bill to reopen schools safely, get shots in arms, and help those who've lost their jobs through no fault of their own. Another scheduling announcement for all of you. On Friday morning, President Biden will meet virtually with his counterparts in the Quad, Prime Minister Suga of Japan, Prime Minister Modi of India, and Prime Minister Morrison of Australia. Formed in the aftermath of the 2004 tsunami and formalized in 2007, the Quad has met regularly at the working and foreign minister level. However, Friday will be the first time that the Quad is meeting at the leader level. That President Biden has made this one of his earliest multilateral engagements speaks to the importance we place on close cooperation with our allies and partners in the Indo-Pacific. A range of issues, of course, will be discussed. We expect to be discussed, I should say, facing the global community, from the threat of COVID to economic cooperation, and of course, to the climate crisis. Earlier today, final piece here, our COVID coordinator, Jeff Zients, had a weekly call with governors from across the country. He announced Pfizer and Moderna supply will again increase to 15.8 million doses going out to states, tribes, and territories, along with 2.7 million first doses going to pharmacies. He also highlighted the progress we've made as a nation on vaccinations. On January 20th, there was a 7-day average of 890,000 shots per day. Today, we were averaging 2.17 million shots per day. So it's obviously a significant increase. Finally, of course, reiterate our commitment to working and collaborating with governors from both parties and encouraged continued focus on masking, social distancing, while our vaccination program continues to ramp up. Why don't you kick us off?
Thanks. Question on with the influx of young people and just migrants in general to the southern border, is there any sense, and I asked this question with the first, obviously you're only 2 months into the administration, but early on you and Secretary Mayorkas very much stressed humanity and trying to move away from the last administration. Does the message need to be tweaked at all? Do you need to say that it's not just about humanity, that also you might not get in, or you probably aren't going to be able to stay?
Well, humanity will always be a value from the president on down, but you are right that we are continuing to work to convey to people in the region that this is not the time to come, that the majority of people who come to the border will be turned away, which is factually accurate. And what we're really talking about in terms of the people who are being let in are unaccompanied children. That is a policy decision which we made because we felt it was the most humane approach to addressing what are very difficult circumstances in the region. And that means there are more children, kids under the age of 18, of course, coming across the border.
At this point, is this a crisis at the border?
Look, I don't think we need to sit here and put new labels on what we have already conveyed is challenging. What we have conveyed is a top priority for the president, what our policy teams are working on every single day. There was a trip to the border this weekend. They are working over the course of every day since then on putting in place policies that can help address what we're seeing and help ensure that we are keeping these kids safe and moving them as quickly as possible from Border Patrol facilities to shelters where they can have access to educational resources, health resources, mental health resources, legal aid, etc. Go ahead.
On follow-up on that, Jen, thanks. There are reports out there that the number of unaccompanied migrants detained at the border has tripled in the last 2 weeks to 3,200 plus. Is that number accurate?
I'm not going to confirm numbers from here. Obviously, the Department of Homeland Security and others oversee the programs and the engagements that happen at the border. I will say that there are a couple of reasons. I know Amar asked about our kind of change in policy, but there are a couple of reasons why we think people are coming to the border. Of course, individuals are fleeing countries where individuals and families are, they're fleeing prosecution, fleeing violence, fleeing economic hardships and other things. The region has also experienced 2 hurricanes in the fall, putting further stress on the conditions in these countries and the circumstances that are facing individuals. And all of this is taking place during a global pandemic that has impacted other countries' economies, placing undue hardships on its people, just as it did in the United States. So there are also a range of factors that are leading individuals to come to the border.
Pop shops had time to get their applications in and approved. And at the same time as the president's announcement, the administration launched a whole of government effort to let small business owners and lenders know about this opportunity. The Small Business Administration launched a series of conversations reaching thousands of community leaders through webinars every day. White House officials held calls that ended up reaching thousands of small business owners directly. And the administration partnered with Congress to help members spread the word about the changes and conduct outreach with their constituents. So now we're reaching the end of the 2-week exclusivity period, and the results are pretty striking. When comparing the data from the exclusivity period with the 10 days preceding the exclusivity period, we've seen a significant increase in the number of loans to the smallest firms, to minority-owned and women-owned firms, and to first-time PPP participants. Specifically, we have approved more than 300,000 loans for businesses with fewer than 5 employees, and that's a 15% increase compared to the pre-exclusivity period. We've approved nearly 200,000 loans to first-time PPP borrowers, which represents a 25% increase. There's been a 20% increase in loans to minority-owned businesses, and that translates to an additional 1,000 minority-owned businesses accessing relief every single day of the exclusivity period. There's been a 14% increase in loans approved to women-owned businesses, which translates to an additional 600 women-owned businesses accessing relief every day. And there's been a 12% increase in loans approved to businesses in rural areas. But that's not all. On February 22nd, the president also announced several other changes to expand access to PPP. And as of last Friday, the SBA had implemented all of these changes. And we're already starting to see some early momentum from those changes as well. For example, nearly 30,000 loan applications had previously been flagged because the small business owners were delinquent on their federal student loans. We removed that restriction and can now advance those applications. And tens of thousands of new applications have already come in after we increased the amount of relief available to sole proprietors and the self-employed. So I want to take this opportunity to say to the small business owners out there, there's still plenty of time left in this program. There's still plenty of money available to you. Go to sba.gov, contact your lenders, and see if you qualify for relief. The administration is going to continue to conduct outreach and spread the word about these relief efforts and what's available to small businesses. But of course, our view is that that's not enough. And that's why the American Rescue Plan includes more than $50 billion in additional aid for small businesses. It provides more than $28 billion in grants to support the hard-hit small restaurants through the Restaurant Revitalization Fund, which was a bipartisan proposal in Congress. It provides $15 billion in grants to help the smallest, most severely affected businesses, especially those that serve lower income areas. It provides $10 billion to restore the successful state small business credit initiative, which leverages private dollars to provide working capital to small businesses. And it creates a community navigator program so that small business owners can get help figuring out how to actually get the relief that they're entitled to, even if they don't have a team of lawyers and accountants on call. So with that, I'm happy to take some questions.
Okay, go ahead.
This is related to something that we're seeing on the Hill. And there is sort of an increasing movement among Senate Democrats to get extended unemployment insurance and stimulus checks added to the next Build Back Better legislation. As you're aware, Senator Durbin has signed on to it, and they argue that this is needed to sort of keep, both of these things are needed to keep people out of poverty. I'm wondering if you agree with that assertion from an economic standpoint, and what your thoughts are.
Well, number one, the American Rescue Plan has been documented by several independent experts as providing a tremendous amount of relief all by itself to lower income and middle class families between the economic impact payments, the checks, the changes to the child tax credit. There's going to be an enormous infusion of relief for lower income and middle income families. As you know, and as the president has said, this is only step one. Step two is the Build Back Better agenda, and I think we're still trying to think through what the aspects of that program are going to be. We have received the letter from the senators who've talked about potentially including recurring relief payments in it. We're looking at the idea, but we're still thinking through the contours of what's going to be in that next package.
Thank you. Thank you. So earlier today at the events, President Biden said that a lot of PPP money went to people who shouldn't have got it. I was hoping you could elaborate on that. And also, I was wondering if you had any thoughts on concerns about inflation with the new stimulus bill that's about to be passed.
Sure. So on the president's statements, I believe he was referring to the fact that in the previous round of PPP in the previous administration, there was documented problems from the Inspector General of the Small Business Administration that tens of thousands of companies that were not eligible for PPP ended up receiving it. In part, that was because the previous administration did not put any checks in place on the front end, in other words, when the application was received, to make sure that these were eligible companies. We've changed that. There's now significant upfront checks to make sure that any application that's submitted meets the criteria for the program. And at the same time that we've instituted those, we still are processing nearly 100% of applications within 48 hours. So we've tried to find the right balance between making sure that folks who are not eligible don't get the relief, but the folks who are eligible get it as quickly as possible. And we think that's a significant change from the previous administration. On inflation, it's something that, as the president has said, as Secretary Yellen has said, we are monitoring carefully. Our belief has been from the beginning that the risk of doing too little to help American families outweighed the risk of doing too much. That said, we will always be carefully monitoring inflation, and we will continue to do so going forward.
Thank you. Given the president's on the verge of signing the relief bill, we're seeing vaccines rolling out at a quicker pace. Could you give us just a broad sense of where you think we will be with the economy at the end of this year? Secretary Yellen has addressed employment for 2022, but what about the forecast for right now, the end of the year, I should say?
Moody's, which is an independent Wall Street firm, projected that the American Rescue Plan would bring back roughly 7 million additional jobs by the end of the year. We think that that's a pretty reasonable forecast. There are, as we said, there's a significant amount of relief that is going out to lower income, middle income families through this bill. As you said, the vaccine rollout is accelerating. Obviously, that in many ways is the key to accelerating the economic recovery. So we're optimistic about that, and there's good, credible, independent experts that suggest that we will be making a big step towards getting these 10 million jobs that were short back by the end of the year.